The spotlight found him before anyone in the room knew who he was. He was walking toward the stage from the wrong direction, not from the wings, not from a side entrance, but from the middle of the house. Row 12, left aisle. Hat pulled low, jacket 2 sizes too big. The kind of person who comes in through the front door and pays for his own seat like everybody else. Leonard James was still holding the microphone when he saw the figure coming up the stage steps. He'd been standing in front of 6,300 people for nearly 4 minutes asking a question he'd never had to ask in his 20 years of producing live shows. Nobody had answered. A few hands had lifted halfway. The kind of gesture that says maybe, not yes. Smokey had thanked them and looked past them. Then this kid stood up from row 12. It was October 5th, 1979, the Shrine Auditorium, Los Angeles. The house was full for a Motown anniversary concert, the kind of night where the last 20 years of American music shared the same building at the same time. Smokey Robinson was the headliner, 3 songs from closing his set, when Angela Reeves, his featured vocalist for 12 years, walked off stage and didn't come back. She'd been fighting a throat infection since Tuesday. Her road manager knew it. Her vocal coach knew it. She knew it. What nobody knew was the exact moment it would give out. It gave at 10:14 p.m., 40 feet from the stage entrance, when her knees buckled and she sat down on the concrete floor, and what came out of her throat was something between a whisper and nothing. The crew called it in fast. Smokey was midway through a verse when the message reached him through his earpiece. He finished the phrase he was on. He turned to his band and made a small motion with his hand. The musicians wound it down together, professional and quiet. The crowd stirred, confused. Smokey walked to the front of the stage and looked out at 6,300 people. He wasn't performing anymore. He was just a man with a real problem. "I'm going to be straight with you," he said. His voice was easy. No panic in it, but no performance either. "Angela's not well. She can't come back out." He paused. "We have 3 songs left. Big ones. And I need someone in this room who actually knows them." The hall went quiet in a way concert halls rarely do. In row 12, Michael Jackson sat with his hands flat on his knees. He'd bought the ticket 3 weeks earlier. 1 ticket, cash, at the box office on Figueroa. He told nobody he was going. His assistant found out because she managed his calendar, and even she didn't push for a reason. When she asked, he said he wanted to hear Smokey sing. That was the whole answer. He was 21 years old. Off the Wall had been out for 6 weeks. Don't Stop Till You Get Enough was sitting at number 3 on the Billboard Hot 100, still climbing but not there yet. At Epic Records on 51st Street, the language around the record was careful. Promising start. Let's see if it holds. The kind of phrasing that sounds like encouragement until you sit with it long enough to understand what it's actually saying. 2 weeks before this night, Michael had been in a conference room on the 14th floor, listening to a man in a gray suit explain that solo careers built on one hit single were fragile things. The music industry had a very specific memory for artists who peaked early and faded quietly. The man in the suit had named 3 of them, unprompted as examples. He hadn't been rude about it. That almost made it worse. Michael had grown up around buildings like this one. Not in them exactly, but close enough to feel the difference. He'd stood backstage at 12 years old watching Smokey rehearse before shows, trying to understand how a voice could sound that open and that controlled at the same time. He used to stay in the wing long after he needed to, just listening to the phrasing, the space Smokey left between words, the way silence could do as much work as sound if you trusted it enough to let it. Tonight he was back in the building, but from a different angle. Hat down, jacket up. Seat 14, row 12, left aisle. When Smokey asked the room, Michael felt something he recognized from a long time ago. The same thing he'd felt at 9 years old before his first television appearance, and again at 16 before a solo spot Joe had scheduled without telling him until the morning of the show. A specific weight that settles low in the chest and just waits. He looked at the microphone standing alone in the center of the light. He looked at Smokey, scanning the room with the patience of someone who'd run out of other options. He thought about the man in the gray suit on the 14th floor. Then he stood up. He didn't raise his hand. He just stood. A woman in the row ahead turned around because the movement caught her peripheral vision. She looked at the hat, the jacket, the way he was holding himself. Very still, very straight. She almost said something and then didn't. Michael walked into the aisle. The stage manager saw him first. Ray Cortez, 22 years at the Shrine, had intercepted every kind of audience member who'd ever tried to get to that stage. He moved a step in front of him, and then he stopped. He'd worked the floor the night the Jackson 5 played their first Shrine show in 1970. He recognized the walk before he saw the face. He stepped aside without a word. Michael came up the stage steps and walked into the light. Recognition moved through the auditorium from the front rows back. Not all at once, but like a current finding its path through a room. People rose as it reached them, row by row, without anyone signaling them to. Some of them later said they couldn't explain why they stood before they even understood what they were looking at. By the time Michael reached the center microphone, all 6,300 people were on their feet. Smokey Robinson looked at him for one moment. Then he smiled, not the one he used on stage, the other one, and stepped aside. Michael stood in front of the microphone. He looked out at the house and let the room settle before he said a single word. "Good evening," he said. That was all. He turned to the band and hummed two notes, the opening of the bass line from Cruisin'. The bassist caught it in 3 seconds. Michael held up one finger and touched his ear. He wanted the monitors lower. Angela's monitor mix was built for a different voice, layered and supported on all sides. Michael listened to it for 1 second and shook his head slowly. The tech reached for the board and pulled the levels down. When the monitors dropped, most of the supporting structure went with them. The backing vocal tracks, the reverb, the careful architecture of sound Angela had assembled with this band over 12 years of shared stages. What remained was a microphone, a room, and whatever Michael brought into it on his own. He chose Cruisin' first, Smokey's song, not his. That was a decision. He didn't announce it. He just started singing. The opening line came out slow and clean, the way the song actually wants to feel, like a Sunday afternoon that nobody's trying to end. The band fell in behind him, adjusting to his tempo without being told. He was taking it slightly slower than Smokey usually did, leaving more space inside the phrases. The room, which had been on its feet and buzzing, got completely still. Backstage, Angela Reeves sat in a folding chair with an ice pack against her throat. Someone turned up the monitor feed so she could hear what was happening. She listened to the first verse and put her hand over her mouth. In the left wing, Quincy Jones was standing with his arms folded. He'd come to the show to pass along a quick recommendation to Smokey about a session player, something that would take 5 minutes. He'd been watching from the side of the stage since Angela went down. He had a record to finish, a label asking questions about costs, a calendar stacked with things that couldn't be moved. He had exactly the kind of evening that keeps pulling a person's mind somewhere else. He hadn't thought about any of it for the last 4 minutes. He was still holding his jacket over one arm from when he'd been about to leave. He was watching Michael's hands on the microphone stand, 2 fingers resting on the bass, not gripping, just resting. The way his weight was distributed, easy and slightly forward. A 21-year-old kid with 6 weeks of solo career, standing in one of the biggest rooms in Los Angeles, with the monitors turned down and nothing underneath him but the floor. Quincy had been in this business for 30 years. He had worked with people who performed and people who simply did what they did. And he had learned over a long time that those two things looked almost identical from a distance. Up close, they were nothing alike. When Cruisin' ended, the applause took a beat to begin, the way it does when a room has forgotten to breathe. Then it came up full. Michael nodded once at the audience. No bow. Smokey walked back to the microphone and put his hand briefly on Michael's shoulder. "Now sing yours," he said. Michael looked at him. Then he turned back to the band. He hummed the bass line. 2 notes, low and slow. The bassist caught it immediately. The drummer found the pocket. The keys came in underneath and locked in. "Don't stop till you get enough," started with that bass line going forward like it already knew where it was headed. Without the full production behind it, without the sonic architecture of the studio version, what the room got was the skeleton of the thing, the rhythm, the voice, and the space between them. That turned out to be enough. More than enough. By the second bar, half the room was moving. By the chorus, all of it was. Michael worked the song the way someone works a room they understand well. He watched where the energy gathered. He pulled back where the crowd was already loud and pushed forward where it needed drawing out. He stayed present the whole time, making decisions in real time, making them look like the most natural thing in the world. When it ended, Smokey came back to the microphone and stood beside him. He let the room run for a moment, then leaned in. "I taught that boy nothing," Smokey said. "He just listened." In the left wing, Quincy Jones opened the small notebook he always kept on him. He didn't write Michael's name. He didn't write the name of the song. He wrote 4 words. "What comes after this?" Michael came down the stage steps the same way he'd gone up, hat adjusted, walking back toward row 12. A woman in the 3rd row reached out and touched his sleeve as he passed. He stopped, looked at her, nodded once, and kept walking. He sat back down in seat 14. 8 days later, "Don't Stop Till You Get Enough" reached #1 on the Billboard Hot 100, Michael Jackson's first solo #1 single. 3 years after that night, Thriller went into production. Quincy Jones produced it. It became the best-selling album in recorded history. When people later asked Quincy when he first knew what Michael was truly capable of, he would give different answers in different rooms. But people who knew him well said the honest answer was always the same night. Smokey Robinson has told his version of that evening in a few interviews over the years. The detail that stays the same across all of them isn't the performance. It's Michael walking back to his seat afterward, just sitting down in row 12 like he'd done a perfectly ordinary thing. "He didn't come that night to perform," Smokey said. "He came to listen. That's the only reason he was ready." There's a version of success that looks like always being on stage, and then there's the version where you buy a ticket, sit in row 12, and pay attention. The second one builds the first. When did you last show up somewhere just to learn with nothing to prove? Drop it in the comments.